The Last Door, a horror story. The first call. It was 11:30 p.m. in New York City, and I was sitting in my small apartment, my desk cluttered with papers and my laptop still glowing with the last remnants of my work. The window was cracked open just a little, enough to let in the distant hum of the city streets below. The lights from the city seemed to pulse in time with the beat of my tired heart as I scrolled through emails. I had been working late for the past few nights, trying to finish a project that was well overdue. As I leaned back in my chair to stretch, my phone buzzed, cutting through the stillness of the room. The screen flashed an unknown number, and a feeling of dread settled in my stomach. Normally, I would have ignored it. I didn't like answering calls from numbers I didn't recognize, especially this late. But something felt different. Maybe it was the silence of the room, or the fact that I had been up for too long, but for some reason, I picked up the phone. "Hello?" I said, my voice hoarse from the dryness of my throat. For a long moment, there was nothing on the other end but silence. I was about to hang up when I heard it. A faint whisper. It was barely audible. A strange, distorted voice, like it was coming from the other side of a thick wall. "Don't open the door." I froze. My blood ran cold. I wasn't sure if I had imagined it, but the words hung in the air long after the voice had faded. The calmness in my chest was replaced with a growing sense of dread. I glanced over at my front door. It was locked. I lived alone. No one had any reason to be at my door at this hour, but still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Before I could say anything, the call cut off, leaving me in an eerie silence. I shook my head, trying to push the creeping unease away. It was just a prank call. It had to be. I went back to my work, but the weight of the whisper lingered in the back of my mind. I was about to return to my laptop when I heard it. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, methodical, deliberate. I turned to look at my front door, which was still shut. There was no way anyone could have gotten in without me hearing them. I lived on the 9th floor of my apartment building, and the elevator was broken. No one came up here at this time of night. Another knock, louder this time, echoed through my apartment. My pulse quickened. My feet moved on their own, carrying me toward the door. The phone call, the knocking, they were connected. It had to be. I walked to the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the peephole. I leaned forward, carefully checking the hallway outside. There was nothing, no one. Just an empty, dimly lit hallway. The building's old lights flickered above, casting long shadows on the floor. I stepped back, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The knocking had stopped. It was as if whoever or whatever was at the door had never been there at all. But then my phone buzzed again, the same unknown number. This time I didn't hesitate. I answered the call, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who is this?" I demanded. The voice on the other end was different this time, more urgent, more distorted. The whisper was replaced with a rasping, chilling voice that sent a shiver down my spine. "You already opened it." I felt my throat go dry. The words didn't make sense, but they had weight to them. I stood there, frozen, as if the room was closing in on me. The knocking began again, but this time it was louder, faster, almost frantic. My mind raced, struggling to process what was happening. I had been sitting in my apartment, alone. My door was locked, my phone hadn't rung before. No one had entered my building. I was sure of it. So how was this happening? The call ended abruptly, leaving a silence so heavy that I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The door, my front door, was slightly ajar. I didn't know what to do. The rational part of me screamed to call the police, to get help, but my body wouldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the gap between the door and the frame. I tried to speak, to tell myself it was nothing, that maybe I had just imagined it all. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I reached for the doorknob. The door creaked open. There was nothing there. The hallway was empty. But the moment I crossed the threshold, the temperature in the apartment dropped. It felt as if the air itself thickened, became heavier, suffocating. I stepped forward, my legs unsteady, and that's when I saw it. A figure. It wasn't a person, not entirely. It was tall, impossibly tall, almost too tall for the space it occupied. It stood at the far end of the hallway, just outside my apartment. Its body was long and unnaturally thin, with limbs that seemed too long for its frame. The thing was cloaked in darkness, as if it were made from the shadows themselves. And then it moved. Not like a person. It didn't walk. It glided, jerking in strange, unnatural motions as it came toward me. The lights in my apartment flickered, my chest tightened, and I found myself unable to move, frozen to the spot as the thing drew closer. Its face, if you could even call it a face, was blank. No eyes, no mouth, just a void where a face should be. I backed away, my heart hammering in my chest. But I couldn't look away. I couldn't move. It was as if the thing's presence was pulling me in, making me helpless. The thing reached out, its hand a collection of long, gnarled fingers. It touched my chest. The contact sent a wave of cold through me, as if my very soul was being frozen. The room spun, my vision blurred, and before I knew it, everything went black. I awoke in darkness, not the familiar darkness of my apartment, but something far more oppressive. My head throbbed, my body aching as if I had been in a violent struggle. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I had gotten there. The silence around me was deafening. No city noises, no hum of life outside my apartment window, just absolute, suffocating quiet. I reached out with my hands, feeling the cold, rough texture of stone beneath me. The floor was uneven, almost like the remnants of an old, abandoned building. My chest tightened in panic. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat, swallowed by the strange air around me. As I slowly stood, I could make out faint shapes in the dark. I wasn't alone. Shadows moved at the edges of my vision. They seemed to be shifting, folding in on themselves, merging with the darkness. And then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Deliberate, a single, rhythmic sound that echoed through the vast emptiness. I froze, my heart pounding. The footsteps stopped, but something else replaced them. A whisper, that same voice from before. You shouldn't have opened it. I spun around, desperately trying to locate the source of the voice, but it was everywhere and nowhere. My eyes strained, trying to pierce the suffocating blackness, but nothing made sense. The shadows seemed to dance around me, alive, mocking my attempts to comprehend them. The floor beneath me shifted again, and I staggered back, almost losing my balance. The stone was moving, vibrating, as if the very ground was alive, pulsating with some dark energy. Suddenly, a sharp, blinding light cut through the darkness, blinding me for a moment. I covered my eyes with my arm, trying to shield myself from the overwhelming intensity. When the light dimmed, I saw it. A door. It stood before me, standing out against the shadowed walls. Its edges were warped, as if it had been there for centuries, untouched by time. The door was impossibly tall, made of a dark wood that shimmered with a faint, otherworldly glow. The carvings on the door were intricate, far too detailed to be mere decoration. They seemed to move, shifting in strange patterns, twisting and spiraling, as if alive. I couldn't help myself. I reached for the door, compelled by a force I couldn't explain. The moment my fingers brushed against the cold wood, the entire room seemed to shift, the air growing thick with an oppressive presence. And then the whispers returned. You shouldn't have opened it. The voice was louder now. A chorus of voices layered over each other, a cacophony of whispers that seemed to rattle my bones. The door creaked, and slowly it began to open. A wave of cold rushed in, a biting, unnatural chill that seemed to freeze my very soul. My hand shook as I pulled the door open further, revealing what lay beyond. It wasn't another room. It wasn't even a hallway. It was a forest. I wanted to run, I wanted to scream, but my body refused to obey. My legs were frozen, my feet glued to the ground. The thing reached out its long, twisted arm, its fingers stretching like claws, and I felt a cold hand, no, not a hand, a claw, brush against my cheek. A jolt of pure, freezing terror shot through me. My body went numb, and for a brief, horrifying second I thought I was going to lose consciousness. But then I heard a sound, a voice, my own. Don't touch me. The words felt alien, like they weren't mine. They were hoarse, barely a whisper, but they carried the weight of something ancient, something primal. The figure recoiled for a split second, its form jerking back as if the words had caused it pain. I had no idea how I did it, but I forced myself to move, to take a step backward. The forest seemed to shift around me, closing in, but I pushed forward, my every instinct screaming at me to get away from the creature. The forest grew darker still, the trees closing in, as if they were alive and pulling me deeper into their twisted embrace. The hum in the air grew louder, the voices converging into a single chant. You open the door, there's no turning back. The words echoed, surrounding me, filling my ears, my mind. The path ahead of me was obscured by thick fog, but I kept moving, desperate to escape. Then, the earth beneath me gave way. The ground cracked open, a jagged chasm forming right at my feet. I fell, down into the abyss.